Well, David, thank you for joining me once again. It's been a crazy year, 2020. I want to say a big thanks to yourself for taking part in so many different videos on the channel. It's now time to get your high and your low of 2020 following Town. So where we're going to start? We're going to start with the low and then finish with a high.
I think that's, yes. The lows is easy, isn't it? They're just, I mean, where do you start with them? The big one, of course, is having football cancelled and not being in. I think that has to be the big one, because even if you were crawling along in 11th and things like that, it would be totally different if you were in the ground. So that's my huge low is not being in on a purely Ipswich basis rather than that. Lambert's contract. I mean, whether or not you think he's the right man for the job, whether or not anything that giving a manager in football a 5-year contract. I mean, giving Pardew a contract at Newcastle was a stupid idea. Giving Lambert a 5-year contract is a stupid idea. It beggars belief why you would possibly do it, even if he was a footballing genius, which I don't think he is. It ties your hands too much. It gives him the security, but perhaps that is a double-edged sword, because it means he knows he's safe and doesn't drive him on. Giving that. How much of the chaos of the last 12 months could have been assuaged if we hadn't have had that? The discussions would be easier. He perhaps wouldn't be quite so much of a defensive git when he comes to things, because he had to keep people sweet and stuff. I just think that's a stupid thing. So those are the big ones. Not being allowed in, and Lambert having that ridiculous contract. Those are the two things that I think stick out as lows.
What's your high for supporting Town? Is there one that you can think of?
I've struggled with this. I mean, you asked me yesterday on the chat, and I hurled in some sort of backhanded ones, and they're sort of halfway things. And the problem is, my highs tend to be going back to before the turn of the year. So it's the cup win against Lincoln away, but it's. I hesitate to say Dazelle signing a new contract, because that's not really football related. I mean, I'm pleased it doesn't ultimately mean a lot, because if a big club come calling, then we'll sell him anyway. We'll just get more money for him. But it was a rare moment of optimism in there. You've got little ones. I mean, the fact that Chambers has racked up all those appearances, and I know he divides people, but I mean, he's a fantastic servant to the club, and I think that's a good one. I mean, you don't often see a player, especially these days, who's made that many appearances for the club. And you look at the players he's overtaking, they're players from 30, 40 plus years ago. And that says it, So I think that seeing him still there, still grafting, still fronting up and what have you, I think that has to be a real positive for the year. And he's doing okay at right back, isn't he? I mean, he's not his position. He's 35. He hasn't got that energy, if he had it before, to hammer up and down that flank. So, yeah, that's sort of grudgingly one. But mine is, I was hugely critical all last season and the season before of Edwards. Playing him on the right in the Championship as we came down, he was, I mean, with the exception of the first game of the season where I thought, oh, wow. The rest of the time, he was lightweight. He had flicks and tricks, and he always had the ball stolen from him as he tried to flick it over their head again. And, oh, look, Edwards lost the ball. It's in the back of our net. Then the ridiculous experiment of playing him at right back, which, from my mind, has to be Lambert's greatest crime going, especially when you've got Donasian. The forgotten man. But his emergence on the left wing, which is, of course, where he said he wanted to play and where he was best, his emergence as a goal-scoring left inside forward, I think, is the highlight I've seen. And it's just a shame that Lambert doesn't see it quite as clearly as everybody else does. But, when he's out there on the left, he doesn't lose the ball. He's stronger. He cuts inside, and he's a genuine goal threat. And whether it's for himself or laying somebody else on, and that I think has to be the highlight of this season, is seeing that. And it's a shame that he and Bishop are out at the moment, because he does provide that. And I mean, if you're playing that formation, you want those wide players to be cutting in, because then you're overloaded. Then you've got your attacking midfielder coming in, you've got your striker, then you've suddenly got 5 players in the box. If they're playing on the other flank and they're just hugging the touchline, you don't get that overload. You don't get the numbers in the box. So Edwards playing there and nailing that down, it provides us with a genuine threat, and that is really, really good to see. And it's nice. It's actually nice to be able to say I was wrong about a player, because I just thought he was a waste of space. I was hugely critical all last season, but it wasn't him. It was where he was. So yeah, that's probably my highlight.
Well, Brad, thank you for joining me as ever. It's been a pleasure to have you involved since the summer. It's been great having you doing videos and doing game day and all that. So it's time to get your high and your lows of 2020 supporting Town, and it's been a weird year in general. But let's start off with a low.
Okay. Well, we'll start with a low and we'll get to the high point. My low is we can't beat a top 6 side in League One. I find that completely depressing. The fact that top 6 League One sides get pretty much relegated from the Championship when they go up. There'll be a few survive, but you look this year, they're all struggling. And I find it utterly depressing that how we can't beat a top 6 League One side, because I want to get back into the Championship as soon as possible. And how does that bode for us that we can't even do it against the top League One side, let alone a mid-table Championship? So I'm thinking too far ahead into the future, I think, and I just need to get with it that we're in League One. But yeah, that would be my low. I think my high point is probably actually joining the podcast. Can I say that?
Why not?
I can't say that. I like you say, thank you very much for having me on, and I enjoy talking football. That's the thing is, even though we haven't been able to go, it's just still been great to talk football with everyone online, social media, with you guys, yourself, Ross. Keeps you going through this difficult time that we're in. Always something to look forward to. But if I had to give one positive on the club, I'd say Teddy Bishop. I feel like he's really stepped it up this year. It's probably because he's been fit for the first time in quite a while. I know he's injured now, but I felt like now that he's out again, you really see how much we were kind of relying on him to be that creative force. He single-handedly won a couple of games. Gillingham in the second half, he just took the game by the scruff of the neck and scored a 25-yarder. Blackpool away, he was brilliant. He's pretty much every time, apart from a couple of games early on, pretty much every time since then, he's been brilliant. Man of the match on quite a few occasions as well. So yeah, Teddy will be my positive. He's got goals in him this year as well, and I'm still dreaming of Bishop, Dazelle, and Downs in that midfield 3. And I'm sure the system will work if that happens. But anyway, that's another thing for another day. But yeah, so Teddy Bish.
So John, thank you for joining me as ever. It's been a pleasure to have you on Kings of Anglia, game day, everything this year. So let's get your highs and your lows of 2020 in the weirdest year possible.
Yeah, a very strange year. I've got to start off by saying thanks for having me on, Ross. I've really enjoyed it. Speaking to you after games, both when we could be actually there and virtually. And also, well done to Mark, Stu, Andy and yourself for a cracking pod throughout the year, keeping us going in the darkest days, starting the season off with that live pod, and obviously having another one over the festive period. So thanks for that. My personal highs and lows. I'm going to start with the lows and then finish on a positive. So my low would be, it's combined with injuries, but it's more the form of players, the players who promise to push on and deliver. People like Alan Judge, Mayhew, sadly, and John Nolan, who I had backed as well. They seem to have that little bit of promise, and they could be really good at this level, and then they just don't deliver. That's my low. That feeling that they could do something. That maybe if they had a better coach, who knows? Maybe if they had better belief in themselves, or whatever's not working, those key players not performing to the standards I think that they're capable of. I mean, you speak to a Brentford fan, they'll talk about Alan Judge. They're talking about him really positively. We haven't seen that, and I'm not criticising him as a person, but we've just not seen it as a footballer. I mean, Hughes seems a shadow of himself. John Nolan's not really doing what he's in September. He started really well, and I even got David Flisher to admit he played well. Now I'm back. I'm moving closer to David's viewpoint that he's just not good enough at this level. So that failure to push on, from key players, and linked to that is my positive, which is the young players or the younger players, and the highlight of that. You could look at people like McGavin bursting through and getting into the squad. You can look at the return of Teddy Bishop or whatever. But for me, the person who's probably won me over, and I can see why other people liked him as much as they did now, is Andre Dizelle. He's become the mainstay in the team. He's key to the way we're trying to play. He's a really talented player. He's starting to do a bit more of the ugly side as well. I think it would be even better with Flynn Downs doing some of his work with him. But he sees that opportunity to be the main guy in midfield because Skuse has been injured, etc. But he's made the space his own. He signed a new contract. So either we're going to get money for him at some point, or hopefully he's going to build and help us to get where we want to go. So Andre Dizelle, because he's won me over.
Well, Harvey, thank you for joining me as ever. And as well, a big thank you for getting involved in Game Day and just all the other videos that we've done. So let's get into your high and your low of 2020 for Town. It's not been a good year in the world. It's not been a good year supporting Town, really. So let's start off with a low and finish the video on a high.
Well, there's certainly more lows than there is highs, isn't there, this year, unfortunately. It seems to be a common theme for Town of late. I think the overriding low that sticks out for me would be finishing 11th in League One last year. I think when the season finished by COVID, I think we were 8th at the time, weren't we? But realistically, the way our form was at that point anyway, I think we were going to finish 11th, 10th, 11th. I think that was our position for the season, regardless of what happened with COVID. And it just shows how far we've fallen. I've mentioned it a few times before, but we've been sleepwalking into this for so long, whether it's recruitment, managers, players, staff, whatever it is. It's from top to bottom of the club. We've been walking into it. So it feels like it can't get any worse. But looking at how this season's going, looking how toxic the fans are getting with Lambert and with some of the players, it feels like it could get even worse than that if we carry on the way we're going.
And then your high is not many to choose from, but is there just one that you can think of?
I have to think very, very hard about this because, yeah, as you said, it's just there's not been many to pick from. The one that stands out for me is probably a lot of people think is Dizelle, but not just Dizelle and his new contract, but I think a positive out of all the injuries, possibly if you can get one, is the emergence of the young players. You look at Dobra, you look at McGavin, who I think is when he's come in, he's looked good. It looks like he can play a backup to the Dizelle role when Skuse leaves. So he's been impressive. Dobra again, he looks really exciting. He's still a little bit rough around the edges, but I think the more he plays, the better he'll get. So I think it shows that although we're not in a great place in terms of current results, I think we're in a good place going forward. I think back to the under-18s against Fulham as well, which is a really good result for them. It shows we've got talent. It shows we're still producing talent. How long we're going to be able to keep hold of them for is another question when we're finishing so low in League One. But I think for me, that's the main positive, is the emergence of the young players and them showing that, when they're put into the first team, if they're given games, they're given opportunities, they're trusted by Paul Lambert and his staff. then they can do it on the big stage for me.
So, Thomas, thank you for joining me as ever. It's been a very strange year for the world, and of course, for Town, supporting Town, it's not been so good either. So, I want your high and your lows of 2020. So, where are you going to start?
I'll start my highs first, or high, because there hasn't been that many, to be fair. But yeah, admittedly, as we know, we've had a few youngsters come through on that. But for me, I think biggest high for me so far was January this year. Bit depressing, really, when you look at it like that. We started the year, we beat Accrington 4-1, we beat Lincoln 1-0. I met Danny Haynes before the game, and obviously we went to Tranmere, won there, and it really looked like we were sort of turned a new leaf under Lambert. Wasn't convinced, obviously, but we kind of looked like we were looking good again. You know, we were playing out from the back, defenders were running forward. We got some good results, and you know, it was on the up. And then, of course, you know, we've got a few games on our belt and top of the table again. And let's say, of course, it all went downhill from there, as we know.
Now, you're low, or a couple of them this year.
There's quite a few, isn't there? I mean, we've had a few injuries, and you know, obviously we've had a few poor games. But for me, it's probably Lambert and the fact that we've finished in our lowest league position since 1953. Admittedly, yeah, we had PPG. The season didn't finish. Could have potentially got us into the playoffs. I mean, no one can actually tell us now. You know, it's done now. We unfortunately can't change it. But you know, it's our lowest league position in League One for Ipswich Town. It's for what's it, like 67 years, I believe. So it's, my maths is probably quite off there, but you know, it's crazy to think how far we've fallen. It's definitely a low point in terms of 2020. It's the past 20 years, of course. It's not good enough, really. But you know, it's Lambert who's got us there. Evans arguably has got us there, you could argue. And I'd say he's not cut out for the job in my eyes with Lambert. Like I said, about a year ago now, I kind of started turning and realising he's a bit more of not quite what he makes out to be. And you know, I mentioned January earlier, but in a way it papered over the cracks. Because if you listen to Lambert after when it was postponed, he obviously started saying about how February ruined it for us, and that's the reason why PPG happened. But it wasn't. It was January's results made us finish higher than where we would have done if it wasn't for January. We'd definitely finish lower if we didn't get those 3 results in January. When you think about it, because he keeps blaming February for where we finished, but it started in November, and you know, it's the whole season from November onwards wasn't good enough, and that's why we finished where we did. You can't blame it on just February alone and March, but obviously like Sunderland, Wimbledon, all those dire games, Oxford, all we had, and that's forgetting this season. I've gone back quite a long way, to be fair, in terms of the low, but it hasn't got much better since. As we know at the moment, it's gotten worse, but that's definitely a low point for me. You know, it's the 2020 is, you know, your lowest league position in so long. Don't know where do we come from that. Just hope next season's not as low, but the way things are going, you never know.